it's a little daunting to make a comment on all of this at once, and maybe not, but if it is, you might find that there's one sentence here or one part of the exchange that really you had a reaction to in some way. What's that? What is that got your attention? What do you make of it?
I have something to say. It's Kabir. For me, the white ox wandering is more like the wandering mind or the monkey mind left in the field, so like unattended, unattended.
Okay. Yamada has a little different. Thanks, Blake. Yamada has a little different take on that, so you might think about read that too, and compare that with the way you're seeing it.
Okay. Sue, come on and join us.
It seems like Dijong or Jizo comes on really strong. You know, he's testing people. I get the feeling people are wandering in, and it surprised me. It's like I would feel really strange being spoken to the way Dijong does. Like it's a competition. And he is competing. It is a competition, actually. Like he's trying to shake people up. And I think he wins the competition.
So just curious, how do you feel about that? And do you have some emotion connected with that?
Mild amusement. I'm sort of on his side for some reason. And I feel, I guess it's just a culture that I don't know anything about, but I've certainly run into people whose space I've approached who feel, it's their territory, and I need to shape up.
He's also playing the role of a teacher too. Actually, this is taking place in his temple. They've been traveling, and they're coming back, and he's asking them how Buddhism is in the South. So he's also taking a kind of teacher role of challenging them, to get something going that everybody can learn from or clarify. So it's not just not. You're not saying this, but it's not just his wanting to be dominant and be the king of everything. It's that he wants to. His role. He sees his role as challenging them, and they can challenge him too.
Well, I think he would enjoy being challenged.
Yes.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if the people he's speaking to would enjoy it.
How about when Sojin challenged you?
It was mostly very appreciated, and it wasn't a dominant kind of thing at all.
It's true.
It was a wake up. It was a wake up. I didn't feel, and also he was very careful with me. He made sure it was very approachable and gentle. I wasn't one of those students that got the brunt of it.
Yeah.
But then I did try and pay attention too.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Uh, Gimpo, please join us.
Thank you. I feel like what I like about Shuzanshu is he's kind of game and he doesn't get flummoxed. I think that's kind of, I feel like I kind of agree with Sue that he's getting all this stuff thrown at him, but he doesn't really stumble in this case. So I just kind of like that.
Uh-huh.
And he turns the conversation back on Jizo, which is not, I don't know, that seems kind of that requires some kind of internal solidity, I think. He says, how can you save the beings of the three worlds in that way?
Yeah.
Which just, I don't know, that just seems like, you know, not everyone would have the strength to do that.
Yeah. But that's pretty common in the koans that but the way I understand it is they're sharpening each other up. They're challenging each other, but for everybody's benefit. So it's a creative rather than destructive. And as if that creative, you know, let's get to what is real here. And I challenge you to get to what's real here. And then they go back and forth. And that's that kind of edge I really appreciate.
I guess just to finally say that, like, I feel like the case could have ended on planting my rice field and growing rice is better than that. And I thought, you know, that would be fine. But it's just nice to see. It's nice to see that the master doesn't always get accepted, you know, without a certain challenge.
Yes.
So
yeah.
I love what you're saying, Alex, and I feel like part of Gempo, I feel like part of what you're pointing to is they have fun with each other. They're actually really enjoying batting these ideas about and kind of poking each other a little bit.
Yeah. And Blake, could you spotlight Andrea and let her answer, just to respond to a few people?
Pauline.
Hi. So I mean, I also felt, you know, something of what Sue was saying as far as the, you know, competitive or kind of macho aspect of the exchange, which like generally in the koans is something I've been working to try to acclimate myself to because, you know, it's not something I temperamentally found congenial from the get-go, but I do take the point you all are making about it being, you know, a friendly, sort of joyous competition for mutual benefit. You know, for me, I think sort of the turning moment in the case is the line. There's extensive discussion. I think it's, you know, the master asks, so how are things going? The disciple answers, there's extensive discussion, and that was kind of the wrong answer, or at any rate, it's an answer that, you know, I think the master is going to make use of for what's the use of that? Why discussion rather than my rice field, you know, everyday activity just being. I wouldn't say that I've gotten to the bottom of this koan, but I feel like that is the point where it takes its turn.
Yeah, beautiful. I think that's a really good and important part of this. But what about discussion? What's the role of discussion? Is there a role of discussion? After all, that's exactly what they're doing. They're traveling.
Right. Well, it's
talking to each
yeah.
other.
I mean, you have to say something, right? It's that, which I guess is, you know, maybe why it's the answer is not a straightforward rebuke, but it's more performative than that.
Yeah. Yeah, what's the difference between kind of chit-chatting and playing and actually digging into the meaning of the Dharma? Mm-hmm.
Ross?
No?
Ross, I feel like you can call on any of the three of us, actually, if you want to.
Who's calling on who?
You're making a comment, and if you want to hear from any one of us in particular in response, then please feel free to say so.
No, you all are the three treasures, so each one has equal value, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say. My thought or comment is, what do you call the world? And that, for me, resonates with what do you call practice? And in this age, we're not practicing in monasteries, and there's still an ongoing question about inside the gate and outside the gate, and where are we practicing? And back then, I don't know what the situation was where they were practicing. They had that same sense of the secular and the religious, so to speak. And so I'm curious about that. 1,000 years ago, if the practitioners were in the world, and if they had that sense of, well, I have to go work in order to support myself, so it was more divided than it was less divided then because they were supported by the work that they did, versus in our time, we actually have to hold jobs and maintain a house and all that sort of thing. So it has a very different feeling. And I think people get caught in, I'm going to go practice at BZC, and then I'm going to leave, and then I got to go to work. And it's hard for people to integrate those two. Thank you.
I think that's, Jonathan, I see your hand, but I just want to, I think that's a really good jumping off point for conversation with the group, that particular tension between what's it mean to be inside the temple practicing, and what does it mean to be outside the gate, and is that really practicing? If I'm sitting on the cushion, how do I respond to the world? How do I respond to the world outside the gate? I think that's a really good jumping off point. I just want to say that this koan is set in a particular time, and there was the Southern school actually thought it was just the opposite, but as I read this now, I'll just say in the Southern school, that was the place where all the intellectuals were, and they were debating the great questions. And the Northern school was more the farmers, the lay people, the people who were less intellectual, more about a different kind of practice. So this is also pointing to that tension, which Pauline aptly drew upon the whole question about what's the talking and what's the doing, what's the actualizing of the practice.
Great, thank you.
So I'm going to pass this back to you, Ron, or you can pass it on to Ellen.
Okay. Yeah, I think what Ryosha just said about talking versus doing is a real part of this case myself. Ellen, well, you take over. Take a few questions.
Jonathan?
Thanks. Put my hand down while I'm thinking of it. So it's not so clear to me that Dizang wins the encounter isn't so clear to me. I don't think it's so unambiguous. Now, given the structure of the koan and given sort of the way many koans are presented, I certainly think it could be read that way. But I think, the final couplet, I mean, the two statements really, each would be inadequate without the other. Each would be, I think each would be incomplete without the other.
Wait, just explain that to me. So you mean the first sort of paragraph and then the last two sentences? Is that what you mean?
Well, the sort of capping questions that, what can you do about the world and what do you call the world? I mean, just to say, I think it's possible to read the koan as though Zishan is just, he's this immature student and he's, and the master comes along and blows him out of the water. And I don't think that's right. I think the two, I think they're both expressing something correct.
I read it the same way. I agree with you with that. You could talk a little bit more about it. But.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last.
You could talk a little bit more about how you see that a little bit more, I think.
Well, just that, I think Xioshan's concerns are, what do you do about the world? What do you do about all these people that are suffering? That's a real question. And it's not, it's not naive or simplistic or, or stupid. He is expressing something really, he is expressing something at what I see as the core of our practice. And I think to take that as, just a setup for Dizang's punchline is, I think is not right. I think that both, but at the same time, to take that as the only aspect of our practice is also not right. And I think that's what Dizang's response gets at.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I also think, for me, I don't see these as so much of a, kind of a sort of put down either. And I often read them as, and, this is kind of my mind, is that I'll read part of it and I'll go, yeah, that's right. And then I'll read the next part and it just sort of expands, it's like, I sort of feel like I fall for it. And then, the next thing, it just makes me see it differently. And it's often about, the world or oneness or, it's like, how do we function in the world? And then how do we, see it as just one thing, that we're not dividing it up. So, but I find that sort of invigorating, as always, to try to hold both those things.
Yeah.
I'd like to jump in here for a minute. Please indulge me. It's so tempting. I want to move on, but Wansong, bless his heart, addresses this exactly in his commentary in Cleary. And if you'll permit me, I'll read it. I may stop halfway through because I don't want to take too much time. There are 2 paragraphs, but it's exactly about what we're talking about right here. And he's basically pretty much agreeing with Jonathan. Here's what he said. And this is where Wansong brings in another teacher who made a comment that Wansong knows about. So this is not Wansong directly. He's saying, so-and-so said, communion with the source is one's own practice. Communion by speech is showing it to those who are not yet enlightened. So those are the 2 sides that are going on here. It originally comes from the scripture on the descent of the great vehicle into Lanka. I guess that's the Lankavatara Sutra. The Buddha said to Mahamapti, there are 2 kinds of communion. Communion with the source means by way of the character of transcending progress. One attains to utterly detach from false conceptions, from speech and symbols, and go to the realm of non-indulgence. By the process of self-awakening, light shines forth. This is called the character of communion with the source. What is the character of communion by speech? It means teaching the various inductive doctrines of the 9 branches, avoiding signs of difference or non-difference, existence or non-existence, and the like, using skillful techniques to explain the truth as it is needed. This is the character of communions by speech. Students of lectures say, communion by speech without communion with the source is like the sun being hidden by clouds. Communion with the source without communion by speech is like a snake gone into a bamboo tube. Communion with the source and communion by speech together is like the sun in the open sky. Communion neither with the source nor by speech is like a dog howling in a thicket of reeds. I don't think we can say it better than that.
Here in Dakotas.
Well, thanks so much. That's a hard act to follow. That's where I was going, not exactly there, but what Pauline brought up and then Jonathan about when they say, what do you call the world, or what can you do about the world and what do you call the world? I only have Cleary's translation in front of me. It seems to me that one is saying you doing everyday activity doesn't save sentient beings, and Dijong saying, what's saving sentient beings? Like, so I was just going to say that it includes everyday activity that nourishes, and it includes talking about it. Even though we say talking about it is conceptual and is not doing, it is doing. So I was kind of there with that. But like you said, one song said it best. Oh, last thing. I like that it's hard to see, but the second paragraph, students of lectures say communion by speech, it's like the 4 negation, the 4 affirmations and negations. It's like it is, it isn't, it both is and isn't, and it neither is nor isn't. It's nice that they slip it in like that.
Yeah. I like the dog howling in the weeds myself. Nice to have you from another state here with us.
Ken?
What do you call another state?
Well, you decide.
Hi, on this same topic, I'm just kind of brainstorming here, but it occurred to me that we usually approach these things as if this has been selected by, the great teachers and all this. And so we're looking for a strong meaning in every line, which is probably there. I'm willing to give on that. But in any dialogue, there's a lot of fuzziness. I mean, it's actually very rare that you have a question answered, that really is spot on at every point. It's in the nature of speech that there are ambiguous things. There are things where one person meant something, but the other person misinterpreted it, or when they both knew what they were talking about and so on. Yeah, I mean, it reminds me a little bit like when musicians are jamming. If they were talking about it afterwards, they're listening to a recording about it, they might say, okay, that's really good. And that's good over there. Oh, that's, a little waiting pause there. And then that's for, but they all know that it's full of mistakes. Even the greatest musician is not going to be just spot on 100% of the time. And nevertheless, you could come up with something that is a great result, a great experience. And so I'm thinking that sometimes when we say, well, was this person right to ask this or to respond this. Maybe we're being, I think we're right to do that because we're wrestling with it. And that's probably the point of this. But it may be a little misleading to say, well, was this one right and this one was wrong? And maybe that's not really the point. It's just that some encounter has been kind of gleaned here that results in a thing like a prism or something like that, that has lots of mistakes in it still, or lots of half measures or stuff like that. But the result is that they're very provocative. And so you could not have a discussion on these things that wouldn't contain contradictions and all that. And that's what that's why we're talking about it 1,000 years later. Somebody has picked this really great thing, but it's not. I'm just trying to say, I don't think the point is like, it's not like a mathematical equation where you're saying, well, this follows from this, but wait a minute, here's an error or something. I think that it's a construction, or an ensemble that people have picked out because it gets to the nitty gritty without necessarily solving it. There may be sort of partial solutions. I mean, I assume that all these people are pretty hip to these things. They're not just, they're not going to say something totally stupid, but they're going to say something where somebody else will sort of kind of catch them. Just like two musicians going, somebody else will sort of slip in and jazz it up a little bit, and that will cause the other person to go off into a different chord and so on. It's not like either of them are wrong. It's just an exchange. So I think I've said enough there, but I just thought I hadn't usually approached koans thinking that there's a lot of mistakes in here. There's a lot of false starts and stuff, and that's what made the exchange interesting.
Right. So really you're saying in a certain way that you're looking to engage with it more than to solve it, maybe.
Yeah, but of course we engage with it to try to say, what does this mean? That's the nature of it. But I'm just thinking maybe it's not like a mathematical solution that we're going to figure out just who was right and who was wrong kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. Well, in this one in particular, I think, well, maybe in all of them, but there's definitely different facets of it, and I'm not sure any of them are wrong. Thank you, Ken.
Of course, there's the whole tone of voice. Like, there's a million things that can be said just with the tone of voice. So that's hard. And so now we're just left to interpret, and that's a great freedom. We just have these words and we can give it our own meaning.
Right on.
Sue, please. Susan Marvin.
So I don't think what I have to say is so different than what Karen and Ron were saying, but maybe it'll come out a little different. I mean, I took this koan so personally when you read it. And I was thinking a couple things that you said, get back to what's real here. And then that line, what do you call the world? It seems so layered to me, like you can't say it's one thing. And where I went with it was that I've come here from a very long day at school. And one thing I've noticed, we were online for 3 semesters and now we're sort of hybrid back on campus. And the energy level of the students is so low. Our immigrant students have been very strongly affected by the pandemic, great losses in their families, in their lives, and continuing. And the campus itself is kind of dead. There's not this youthful energy that was always there. It's just, like for a month now, ever present. And last week we talked about it. Like, I feel like I'm exerting all this enthusiasm, and there's just all this low energy. And so I just said to the students, what's that about? And we just talked about it. It was, it was a good discussion. And then today when I went, I thought, I'm going to kind of pretend like everything's fine. I'm going to kind of pretend. It kind of reminded me of that when you read it, that koan, every day is a good day. So I went in there and we just laughed and laughed and laughed. And so when you read it, I thought, it's so layered. Like, it's not one and it's not the other, and then it made me think of, what's going on in Ukraine. And I thought, I'll bet there are moments where they're singing and there's joy. We talk a lot about joy in our practice in the middle of great despair. So somehow that's kind of what came up for me, like these two sides of discussion and related to what do you call the world, and then just letting that all go and knowing that there's a way to get back to what's real right here in the moment.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'd say something. What do you call the world? What I think he's getting at is how much is your idea about how you're helping people and in your discussions, how much of that is an idea you have about it rather than what's actually happening? So what do you call, like the three worlds are all samsara, are all within samsara, suffering, but which they're not denying, or Dizang isn't denying, he's just saying, don't just make it intellectual. Whereas I'm just taking care of rice with my hands and my feet, and I'm moving around my body. I'm taking care of stuff that I need to take care of, and not so much thinking about it. And I think so it's not exactly equal, because Dizang gets the last word, and that's not an accident. Plus, and related to what Ken said, these have been adjusted and polished over the years. You can't help it. It's like with the Bible, that stories have been changed and then polished and then changed a little bit here and there. So just to say that last challenge of what do you call the world is like, how are you relating to this rather than what you're actually doing? That's the question that he's posing, and that's the end. So I think that's important.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Yeah. Maybe we should move on to the.
Well, why don't we let Mauro?
Mauro's been waiting very patiently.
I'm sorry.
So I'm still really stuck on this one line. Jushan's response of there's extensive discussion. So I've spent a lot of time around scholars. And so when I saw that, I said, oh, because that's a very particular maneuver that a lot of scholars make when they're asked to speak about what they're studying or discussing, is to answer in a way that really inflates the importance of what they're talking about, but also is very withholding about what is being discussed. But then I realized that I wasn't sure if Jushan was answering from that kind of place of scholarly ego, or was kind of like squaring up in a sparring pose to say, I'm ready to joust about this. So I'm not sure if Jushan was trying to, puff up and kind of just leave it there, or if it was an invitation to joust. Because also as an educator, I think if someone is saying something from a place of ego, versus saying something from a place of invitation, the way that you would engage with that would be very different. And maybe in this case, I don't know if it makes a difference, or if I'm, kind of seeing things in this dualistic way that really isn't there or isn't important. So I'm really stuck on that moment because, like Pauline, I really read that as like a very pivotal moment where I was like, oh, that's a move.
I think that's so interesting. I think one of the things about these koans is that we do filter them through our lives. That wasn't a line. I'm not an educator. I'm not, an academic. It wasn't a line that, grabbed me. But, clearly you and Pauline are both very struck with that. And I find that really great and interesting. So thank you for sharing that. Ron, do you want to go on, or shall we?
Well, let Lynn, can you keep it short, Lynn? Lynn, and Lynn, unmute yourself.
Okay. Yeah, just did that.
Yeah.
What strikes me is that Jason is talking about activity. And then when Shuzan replies, and he talks about how you save beings of the three worlds, isn't just how can you save beings? And then Jason, what do you call the three worlds? In a way, it seems like a teaching on signlessness. One is activity, and then it's made into a noun in both translations, because in the other one, what can you do about the world? And then what do you call the world? So that really struck me. Being in the world versus the talking about, or the signage about the world.
You mean kind of the concept, or is that what you're saying? That it's like the concept of world, or what you think the world is?
Well, I think, it's one is an activity, doing the fields. One is discussing. And then he says, well, how can you save the beings of the world that way? It's bringing in a noun versus an activity, and the same and the other. Well, what do you call the three worlds? So it's, now they're talking about something, or not the activity. So this is what struck me. It's both linguistic in both these translations and conceptual.
Mm-hmm. That's how it strikes me too, actually.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it really goes with the class we had on the 3 doors of liberation, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the comparison with signlessness, I think, is good. Yeah. Let's move on. Even in terms of timing, let's move on to the verse. And who's going to do the verse? Ellen and Andrea, if you want to read the verse one after the other.
Okay, Andrea, you go first.
Okay. The various ways explaining.
Andrea, you're really.
Various ways of explaining the source are all. Can you hear me? Am I frozen?
Off and on.
Yeah.
I'm frozen.
Try it one more time.
One more time, and then I will mute. The various ways of explaining the source are all unnatural. If it flows from ear to mouth, it will fall apart. To plant rice fields and roll rice balls is an ordinary household affair. This cannot be known by one who has not searched to satisfaction. When we have searched to the full, we clearly realize that there is nothing to search for. In the end, Shibo did not make anything of a fiefdom. Forgetting all activity and returning home is the same as birds and fish. Washing his feet in the Suro River in autumn with the murky waters.
That might be enough. I don't think we have to read it again, Ron.
Okay.
I do want to say here that I think these stories, these references to Shibo and washing his feet in the soap, these are, my understanding is that these are stories that are quite familiar, in that culture. They're sort of folk stories or commonly understood stories. So, you have to kind of not feel left out by them. But I just wanted to kind of say that because they show up a lot in the koans, and they make me feel kind of like I'll never understand this because I don't understand who these people are. But
let's take the first couple that, and we three can. Not sure how to do this, so I want to give people a chance to ask a question too. Blake, if you could keep it just like it is, with us three on it, and then we can see the person who's asking the question in the upper row. That's good. Heiko, go ahead. You're muted.
Thank you. The verse reminds me of very directly of Suzuki Roshi talking about the smoking lamp. Here I am trying to explain and help you share understanding, and by doing so, I'm already a smoking lamp. And then when we get to the line, this is the fifth line of the verse, when we have searched to the full, we clearly realize that there is nothing to search for. And so by being a smoky lamp, looking it all over, parsing it out, and then we realize still talking about it is only a smoky lamp and direct experience. I'm not sure if he's referring to ordinary household things, birds and fish and murky waters, all in the same voice or same meaning, but these are direct understandings. You understand murky water, you understand birds and fish are objects. I'm not sure what, but the smoky lamp and the idea that we have to deal with the smoky lamp before we put it down.
Okay. I like the use of the word unnatural. The various ways of explaining the source are all unnatural. In other words, how would you, if we want to explain something, we use our conceptual mind generally. It doesn't have to be that way, but generally that's the truth. And how do you explain something which is not conceptual? How do you naturally explain something which is the source is not something apparently that is you can point at and say, oh, there's the source. Here's me, and there's the source. That's how I understand it.
But you have to look.
Yeah.
Another dimension.
Yeah.
I was going to say another dimension of that is as soon as you talk about things, you separate yourself from them, right? Words are concepts that separate you from them. And I think for me, what he's pointing to here is a unification of activities where you're really just a part of the activity of what's happening. Just like the same with birds and they just fly in the sky and they just swim in the water. They know where they're going to. They don't have to have a concept about it.
And they're not smoky lamps, therefore.
I love the line, if it flows from ear to the ear to the mouth, it will fall apart. That's one of my favorite all-time lines ever, anywhere. It's so tempting, to like try to use language, in this world of, Zen Buddhism that, some people are so articulate, and like Suzuki Roshi, you read his stuff and you just think, if I could just say it like that. And then, you have to you have to experience it. You can't just say it. And it's so tempting, really, I think.
It's a total aside, but for the group, I'll just say in our discussions, the three of us, Ellen is often saying that she's found one of her favorite all-time lines.
That's right.
There are a lot of them in here.
I'm enthusiastic.
And just to mention that Yamada's comment on the second line, if it flows from ear to mouth, it will fall apart, is like when we hear something, if we just repeat that without really understanding what we're saying or really being part of what we're saying, if we hear something that sounds good and then we take that line, that's what we say. That's what I think he means. You hear something and it comes out your mouth too quickly. You haven't really digested it. You've just said you've glommed on to somebody's idea. Oh, that sounds good. Blah blah blah. That's how I read that, and I think that's what Yamada was trying to say in that just that second line.
There's that interesting practice in certain social justice circles where, like, you repeat what the person was saying in circles. I know some of you have like gone through what I heard you say, and then you continue on. That's kind of an interesting. It always kind of makes me nervous, but it's interesting that you just said that, Ron. Kabir?
I was going to talk about that line, and next thing you know, for me, what it came up was, sort of like walk the walk.
Yes.
Yeah. Or Don mentioned it.
A good way to say it.
Yeah. On our previous discussion, it doesn't matter what we call those three worlds. It doesn't matter what we call it. We need to do something. We need to get to work. We bought this yogurt drink today from this Afghan restaurant. My wife loves it, and it's the same drink, but it has so many different names in different languages. But it's this yogurt, delicious yogurt drink. But it has all these in a different language, has different writings, and sort of like lifted, like Yalda, I said, just like we say Allah, Buddhists say emptiness, and this and so on. But it's the same yogurt. It's delicious.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter what we call it. We gotta do something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Kabir came up with what Duishan or Shizanzo should have said. He could have gotten the last word. He should have said, doesn't matter what you call it.
Yeah. I think calling it something has got us in trouble, because then we go to science, we go to the three doors of liberation. You go against all those three.
Yeah.
Okay. It doesn't matter what you call it. At one time, the war was in Afghanistan. Okay. It was the Afghan war. It was the refugees war. When they ran out of whatever, now it's in Ukraine. So it doesn't matter what you call it. Trauma is trauma, and all those languages.
Point to take.
Yeah, I'm just a little shooken up with all this war stuff.
Agreed with what you're saying, and yet if you don't call it something, how do you know what to do?
Well, like Sojan said in the the three doors of liberation, say, like the street sign, it says Russell Street, right? We are here. You can agree with that, But if somebody says, you know, that Russell Street is kind of ugly name. What? Why did you pick Russell? Okay, and if you get caught in that guy making fun of your Russell Street name, then there's war, right? You don't get caught. So I don't know what are you gonna call it? It's up to you, but whatever you call it is fine with me as long as you're helping. Doesn't matter what you call it.
Yeah.
Right? You know, the no trace in the sky, right, with the bird. Well, you know, the other thing that I want to just bring up, what was interesting was coming home like the same as birds and the fish. You know, they migrate from one side of the country to the other side. Probably don't even know why, but they just do it. They're straight to the subconscious. They just go straight to the source. And they don't have the thinking mind. They just, you know. So I think that's what this one is referring to as the effortless, you know.
But Kabir, sort of, how do you make that leap from you have to do something to, you know, doing it without, you know, sort of in that effortless way?
You get your ego excited. You know, I mean, in Buddhism and you know, there's no carrot, there's no stick, right? But you can dangle something like, oh, and then just practice. I don't know. I mean, a lot of times, you know, you're desperate to do something. You can't, you know, the element of surprise that, you know, something just, I mean, coming home from school in a bus, and next thing you're seeing jets flying and your street is full of tanks, and the composure. But I think I was thinking the other day, it's like, actually, we have gyroscopes in our bodies. And when that is kind of out of whack, then we sort of do all kinds of stuff. But I think when sitting zazen, that sort of like lines it up. But when trauma hits, we're born to survive. And so, you know, it just kicks in. But to make the effort, it just, yeah.
Yeah, it's just worth thinking about. How do you decide what you're going to do? Those are, you know, sort of I mean, it's like you have to think about it. You have to talk about it.
You have to talk about it. And I sort of kind of see what Dogen meant is to study the self, is to forget the self, and all that good stuff. I don't think he was talking about neglecting the self. I think what he was talking about is sort of like you just keep turning the attention to self and then other self to other. You know, like if we do that, then there's no back slash from the body, from the mind. There's no you know, so you got to take care of yourself, and then you also got to move forward.
Yeah, it's just a conundrum, you know. It's just, you know, we're all.
It's a delicate dance, you know, like you guys mentioned. I mean, it is a dance. I'm taking too much of your time. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Thank you.
Well, let's just take those next two lines. To plant rice fields and roll rice balls is an ordinary household affair. This cannot be known by one who has not searched to satisfaction.
Well, until you've searched to satisfaction, you're always looking for something better. And it certainly can't be found in a rice ball. It has to be at Chez Panisse or some other place.
Yeah.
But when you've searched to satisfaction, then whatever you have in front of you is good enough. You know, it's complete.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
We've got a couple of hands up. Do you want to?
Heiko, do you want to comment?
Well, streaming along from Kabir's discussion, and I had a response to, and right into what we were just going for. The searching is like, okay, I want to pursue social justice. Arriving at social justice is going to be achieved not by giving up and not searching for it, but when it's arrived at, not saying this is now social justice and other things are not social justice. So in other words, engaging in the rolling of rice balls, thinking about and trying for social justice will not be, the value of that will not be yielded to any individual until they also let go of searching for social justice in a way that they can experience it without judging it as, oh, this is social justice. And so with what Kabir's word was, I forget now, it's been several minutes, but pursuing it and letting it go, pursuing the self and letting it go. Once we encounter the self, by virtue of breaking it down and really struggling with it, it seems to me that we then have to let go of what we found. And so I feel like these lines are saying that, as well as encouraging us not to give up on words, but also when we study them, let them go. That's my comment.
All right. Sue, did you want to chime in?
Briefly, the idea of, or the words, this cannot be known by one who has not searched to satisfaction, somehow connects me to what I guess is the point of this. How should one pass the day? In the beginning paragraph, how should I live? What's the purpose of my life?
No, I think
Good point. Good point. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Yeah. We're getting down to last couple of minutes. Should we tie it all up, or should we? I can't tie it all up.
I think we should tie it all up.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Judy. We'll catch you next time. Well, how was this class for you guys? I mean, you know, we did a lot of back and forth, a lot of people saying things. Does anybody have any to help us for next time? Any comments or suggestions?
Ron, I just wanted to know, what do you call the three worlds?
Look at your own life. I would say see your own life, be aware of your own life.
So you could email us if you want. Also, I'll just say that I will send out the next set of 2 versions of Koan, and will be case number 20.
Which one is that?
Not knowing is most intimate.
Okay, so Rushin will be taking the lead on that one. And that's the one she likes particularly. And so we'll be doing that next week. Thank you all very much. we look forward to next time.